Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are operating under the assumption that Metroid Prime 4 will show up in the next Nintendo Direct. This is not guaranteed. We don't know for sure if it will be there, but many think it will. For a variety of reasons, it's that last big Switch game outside of Legend ZA. We've seen many signs suggesting that the game is nearing completion, like different job listings that they've been in the game testing stage since early last year. And so with this potentially being the final big Switch 1 focused Direct before Nintendo starts to show off Switch 2 later this year potentially, many think that this is the time for Metroid Prime 4. But if somehow, someway it doesn't show up in this Direct, I personally wouldn't be that upset because then I would just operate under the assumption that it's coming out sometime in 2025 and it's definitely going to have something to do with Switch 2. And even if it does have something to do with Switch 2 and is a cross-gen title, I still think there's a fantastic chance we still see it in this Direct. Breath of the Wild was a big cross-gen title, and we saw a whole bunch of footage of that game before Nintendo showed anything for Switch back then. So this Direct may bring us our first proper trailer for Metroid Prime 4 that gives us actual meaningful details on the game. And that's what I would like to talk about today, how they may go about presenting this trailer in the upcoming Direct, and what kind of details we may get. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So in preparation for this video, I've been going back and watching key moments for a lot of Nintendo's big directs over the years during the Switch era. And I've been trying to see some sort of pattern for big releases. Because Metroid Prime 4 is certainly a big release, and I say that with air quotes because obviously there's room for interpretation there, and we do not know how successful Metroid Prime 4 is going to be, but I'm very optimistic that it's going to be a fairly successful game. At least at the level of Metroid Dread, but I'm thinking even beyond that. And so in looking at the different directs and the different big game reveals, my takeaway is that sure, Metroid Prime 4 would make a lot of sense as the last big reveal, the one more thing at the end of the Direct, but also they could still open the show with it. They could put it in the middle. If they open the show with Metroid, then I think that's because the game is coming out this year. And so potentially the very first thing we see is Metroid Prime 4. And so the moment we have a hint of Metroid in the beginning of the Direct, that would be very exciting. But then that would also mean that, yeah, it's just coming out for Switch 1 and they are not preparing some sort of cross-gen release sometime in 2025. Now, of course, Switch 2 may have different updates for different games, and Prime 4 could get that down the road, but it's different. However, that's not the point of this discussion, so we're not going to dwell too much on that. Now, if we see Prime 4 in the middle of the Direct or at the end of the Direct and they don't give us a timing on it, or they just say 2025, then I think that's a very clear hint that, yeah, this is going to be tied into Switch 2. Metroid Dread actually was shown off in a pretty significant segment during the E3 2021 Direct, just somewhere randomly in the middle. It wasn't the beginning or the end, but it was a significant amount of time. When they started off that segment, they first mentioned that they are hard at work at Metroid Prime 4 and development is going well, and then they dived into a whole bunch of details on Metroid Dread, including its first trailer. And Metroid Dread was an October release, basically a holiday title, so that may be the way things go if Prime 4 is a holiday title this year, or it still may be the way things go even if it's not a holiday title this year. There are many people who think that Prime 4 wouldn't be a good idea to close the show. One, because some people don't think Metroid is going to sell, even though Dread has sold pretty well. But also two, because many think that Metroid doesn't do that well in Japan, and as the final big reveal of the Direct, it may not go over well for that part of Nintendo's audience. And I think it's an interesting thought to say the least. However, we've seen smaller games close out Nintendo Directs before, still pretty hype, exciting games for us core Nintendo fans, like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for example. They closed out the February 2022 Direct with that game, and sales-wise, well, Metroid Dread is a bigger deal than even that. So I am not sure that Metroid Prime 4, something that many are expecting to be a much bigger deal than even Dread, won't be significant enough even for the Japanese audience to close out what many think could be the last Switch 1 focused Direct. There aren't too many options left that would satisfy that end of show reveal. But there is one game that comes to mind, or actually two I should say, that could do that. One would be a trailer for Pokemon Legends ZA. That would certainly fit the mold. However, typically, we've never really seen Pokemon take on that significant of a presence in a Nintendo Direct. Now, it may be in the Direct, but it's likely not the close of the show. But something we have seen close the show quite often is something Mario or something Zelda. Something Mario, I think we're kind of past that point. I think Nintendo's been going through a lot of Mario lately, and whatever's left Mario wouldn't be something they close the show with, like maybe a Mario Sports title, maybe a Mario Party. Those could be some pretty substantial reveals in the Direct, but they won't be the show closer. There's gotta be a show closer. So a show closer might be, for example, a new 2D Zelda. I think that would be a pretty good way to close the show. So if we're getting 2D Zelda this year, then that could take place in Metroid Prime 4. But beyond that, I don't really think there's much else that would make sense as an end of show reveal as a big holiday release this year. In the case of Prime 4, similar to how we've seen multiple teasers for Tears of the Kingdom years before its release be the end of show reveal, Prime 4 could definitely fit there, regardless of how Nintendo is going to handle its release timing. But how would this trailer go? Well, if the game's coming out for Switch 1 this year, then definitely they're going to show us a lot of gameplay. There will be some cutscenes too, we'll definitely get some story moments in there, but we're going to very clearly see a lot of gameplay. And I think this is an important distinction to make, because potentially, if this game's being saved as a cross-gen title for Switch 2 in 2025, maybe they want to be a bit coy on the visual look of the game and its overall fidelity, and they're going to focus on something that's perhaps more teaser-like, something like that very first trailer for Tears of the Kingdom when it was just known as a sequel to Breath of the Wild. It still gave us hints as to the overall visual look and art style of the game. It still gave us hints as to the story of the game and gameplay to an extent, but it wasn't straight, blatant gameplay like other trailers for Tears of the Kingdom. And so potentially, that's the kind of trailer we get for Metroid Prime 4 at some point during this Direct if they are saving a cross-gen version. Now, maybe they still somehow show us gameplay for the Switch version because it likely will still look really good. And perhaps this is a teaser more like the Splatoon 3 teaser, which also closed the February 2021 Nintendo Direct. We had hints for story, gameplay, and overall visual look, but there was actual gameplay. And so maybe that's what we get with this trailer. It has been such a very long wait, and unlike that first trailer for Tears of the Kingdom, they showed it off very early on, and it was almost 4 years later that the game came out. Prime 4 may not come out this year, but I'd be totally shocked if it's not out by sometime in 2025. So a teaser trailer like the very first Tears of the Kingdom one may not make the most sense, even if they do want it to be somewhat coy about the game's visual look because there might be a cross-gen version. But something else to take into consideration here is how Nintendo may reveal Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Because many think we're getting those games before release. They have been rumored from credible places, and I agree, we're going to get them before Prime 4 comes out. And so the question is, when are we getting them, and when they might be revealed? Some think that they could be shadow dropped. Perhaps Metroid Prime 2, and perhaps 3 as well, could be shadow dropped in this upcoming Direct. I think there's a chance of that. They basically did that for Pikmin 1 and 2 back in last year's Summer Direct, which was just a few weeks away from the release of Pikmin 4. But the key difference here is that Prime 4, at the earliest, we're anticipating is coming out, say, maybe October of this year. So there would be a bit of a difference there, but I would also say it would make sense because Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are bigger, longer campaigns than Pikmin 1 and 2, and you're going to need some time to play through those games before Metroid Prime 4, so I'm not really a fan of the idea of them coming out just a couple weeks before release. But also, I don't really feel like they're going to get shadow dropped. But regardless, I feel like an announcement has to happen about them, and so that could tie into this reveal. Maybe Metroid Prime 4 is shown off during the middle of the Direct. They first show us a trailer for Prime 4 so we get an understanding of the game to some extent, maybe just like a 90-second teaser, and then afterwards, similar to how they showed off Pikmin 4 in the middle of the Summer Direct last year, they then gave us some word on Pikmin 1 and 2, and in this case, they gave us some word on Metroid Prime 2 and 3, and their plans regarding those. I can easily see a scenario like that, especially if Nintendo's closing the Direct with something like a Zelda game. So there's a few different potential scenarios here that I've discussed. But what about the actual trailer? What will we see in this trailer? Well, I do think we're going to get an understanding of gameplay. They are going to show the visual look of the game. I imagine it's going to be something that will impress us. We will see how Samus looks. So even if there's some gameplay in first person, which is the traditional gameplay of Metroid, we're going to at least have a few cutscenes where we see Samus in third person. You know, kind of like how they showed off Samus in the prior Metroid Prime games. And I'm also going to say, I think we're going to get some sort of lore details, some sort of story that's going to give us at least a hint as to what's going on regarding Sylex's role in this game, because we know that Sylex is going to play a role in Metroid Prime 4. He was following Samus at the end of Metroid Prime 3, he stole a baby Metroid at the end of Federation Force, and according to interviews from Kensuke Tanabe, Sylex will be playing a role in Prime 4. So I'm thinking we'll see something to this, and perhaps that baby Metroid, which I have been theorizing will become the next Prime Metroid, we could see a hint towards that in this trailer as well. Now, if we are getting gameplay, I also think they're going to show us something new about this, something that will be like, whoa, so this is how Metroid has evolved. Maybe they show us more fluid gameplay, how Samus moves around in a more agile kind of way, something that matches more of her feel like in Metroid Dread and the 2D Metroid games, but also still in first person like the Metroid Prime games. Something the Metroid Prime games were not able to accomplish back in the day was showing how agile and quick Samus is. And a lot of that I simply think has to do with the times. Back then, first-person gameplay wasn't as evolved and developed, but over the last few generations, speed and agility in first-person games has become more of a norm. Running on walls, doing slide dashes, melee attacks, all of that stuff is pretty standard. So showing how the Metroid Prime series has become modernized, I think is definitely something they could show here. At the same time, maybe they want to show off something new. What might that new be? Well, there is also a variety of possibilities with that. It might just be something that's teased very subtly. I'm thinking something like how when we had that second teaser trailer for Tears of the Kingdom where we saw like this green puddle and it shot up with a teardrop, that was a hint towards Ascend, which was a very subtle hint, I would say. So we could maybe see something like that. They're not going to show all their cards immediately. We are sure to get more trailers and such for the game as we approach release. Now, if the game's coming out this year, then they may show off a bit more, and there won't just be teases towards new gameplay mechanics, but just straight up, here are new gameplay mechanics, kind of like the Dread trailer. So maybe there could be a montage of Samus's new abilities. So those are my thoughts on how the reveal could go. There's a variety of ways it may go, but regardless of how it goes, us seeing more on this game is going to be exciting to me. And so I am eager for this direct. Even if it doesn't show up, as I said earlier, that just means it's going to have more of a Switch 2 focus in my opinion. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.